Ladies and gents, my name is Xander, aka Diaside, and in this video, we're gonna discuss the Hawkmoon and its best way how to one-tap in Destiny 2 Beyond Light PvP. For those of you OG D1 players like myself, you remember that way back when in Year 1 D1, this thing was an absolute monster and it could one-tap for a wide variety of situations. And the best news for us is that that one-tap is back. And I cannot wait to describe to you as to how to do that, but what this guide's going to also cover is pretty much a how-to in general, not just how to get that one-tap, but how to two-tap, the perks that you should look for, aka random rolls. Yes, you heard me right, random rolls are on this thing, and so many more things, like shot rhythm, as we all know that is exceptionally important to land those crits. Speaking of crits, you gotta get those in order to prot this wonderful weapons perk, and to find out what that is, the only thing left to do is just to simply sit back, relax, grab some of that popcorn, and hit the notification button, and let's jump right into the video. Now many of you are probably wondering, okay Xander, well this is awesome, but how exactly do I use this thing? How is it 2-tap? How is it guarantee a 1-tap? And that's what we're going to analyze by looking at the weapon's first perk called Casual Shots. It states that final blows and precision hits with the Hawkmoon grant stacks of Casual Charge. The final round in the magazine deals bonus damage based on the number of stacks. Stowing Hawkmoon on the final round removes this bonus. More about this in just a couple of seconds, but we gotta look at the second perk that's very unique, and it's called Transformative. And this perk states that future drops of this weapon will have random rolls. Yes, we got some random rolls and more about this in just a couple of seconds. But what I want to do first is I want to analyze that Casual Shot perk and really give you an upfront analysis as to how it actually works. First of all, know that when you have Casual Shot Charge times 1, times 2, times 3, and then swap to a different weapon, that stack is still going to be there when you swap back to the Hawkmoon as long as that is not the final round in the magazine. Very key thing to remember there. But the next thing that I want to show you is all the damage values for the stacks going from 1 to 7, and you guys can see all those right there on screen in this fantastic little chart. By all means, be my guest and take a screenshot of this. And the main two things that I want you to take away from this is that number 1, it's going to take you a 6 times charge to do 272 for a crit and thus one-tap somebody in the head. Keep in mind, how are you getting these charges to stack? By getting critical headshots in the same magazine. Now that doesn't mean that you gotta land all of them consecutively back to back to back, as you can land 2 crits, miss a crit, land 2 more crits, and then get 4, and so on and so forth, and so that's how the charge is then working. Now what you also might have noticed from that previous chart is that you can actually do 426 points of damage for a crit with a Casual Shot Charge times 7. Now I'll be honest, is that gonna happen a lot in PvP? No. But what it does mean is that that value can actually one-tap supers. I know, complete insanity, and when I saw that, I was like, no freaking way! But now granted, that can't one-shot all supers, and it can do only some supers, and I haven't done all the testing for this, but just know that this is very effective, and makes this weapon so much more worthy of its exotic status, just because it can do this. Now the next thing that we gotta analyze is how this thing can actually 2-tap Guardians and 1-tap Guardians. But before we can even do that, you gotta be able to land some crits and some bodies for the weapon's base PvP stats as is, as well as when it happens to be charged with light and even having the Whisper of Hedron's buff. Just that there's absolutely no confusion whatsoever, here's the weapon's PvP stats. But on the left you'll find the weapon with the base PvP stats as is, charged with light stats in the center, and the Whisper of Hedron's buff on the right hand side. Analyzing this just a little bit more, you're gonna find that these TTK stats for the optimal TTK is the exact same across the board at 0.87 seconds. But the way in which you get this is for 3 crits, 1 crit into body, and then 1 crit into body respectively in going from left to right. Now why is this important to note? Excellent question. And the reason why you're gonna get some critical headshots here is because Casual Charge cannot even occur unless you stack critical headshots. Now this doesn't mean that you actually gotta get those kills. In reality, of course, you wanna get the kills, but all it simply requires is getting the critical headshots. And so you could get 1 shot here, 1 shot there, 2 shots here, and then potentially 2-tap somebody very easily by simply having Casual Shot times 4. Likewise, this can also be done when you're charged with light or have the Whisper of Hedron's buff. And the simple fact here is that you actually don't need any single kills to get a 2-tap, because when these two things are combined, either Casual Charge times 1 and charged with light, or Casual Charge times 1 and the Whisper of Hedron's buff combined, you're then still going to be able to 2-tap with the last 2 bullets in the magazine. Again, for crystal clear transparency, you're going to see all the weapons base stats that I've just said right there on screen in the exact same order and going from left to right. First of all, note that the optimal TTK is going to be at 0.43 seconds, and that's just spectacular. But the second thing to note is all the resiliences. And so as you go down to the bottom of this chart, One's going to have 8 resilience for paracasual charge times 4. Paracasual charge times 1 and charge with light is then going to be at 6 resilience, whereas the paracasual charge times 1 and the Whisper Headrun's buff combined is then going to down a Guardian at 10 resilience, aka 201 points of health. Not too shabby of a deal if I don't say so myself. I see you, Bungie, and I like it. But this gets even better, my friends, because this thing, as you already know, can one-tap Guardians, and the way in which you can do so by just the weapon as is having paracasual charge times 6, and thus doing 272 for a crit, giving it that instantaneous TTK. Now I'll be honest, if I got one tap by some enemy Guardian, I know for a fact I'd be a little bit salty. But also note that getting 6 critical headshots in one magazine can be quite tedious and quite difficult, and it's not going to happen that often, but nonetheless it can happen. Yet what I also want to say is that one-tapping Guardians can be a little bit easier by simply having paracasual charge times 5, and also in correlation with having the buff of charge with light or the Whisper Headrun's buff, can still one-tap Guardians. You guys can see those stats right there on screen. Now we've already discussed the paracasual one-tap with the weapon just as is and having paracasual charge times 6. But if you look in the center and on the right-hand side, you're also going to notice that when you happen to have paracasual charge times 5 and a charge with light buff or a Whisper Headrun's buff, you're then going to do 214 or 223 per crit respectively, thus still getting a one-tap, sending enemy Guardians to the afterlife, meaning Anubis a little bit sooner than what they might expect, saying adios, bye-bye, ciao. And having seen all these calculations, I think it's safe to say that this thing is going to be so lethal in PvP, it's going to make enemy Guardians say, what the heck did I just get wrecked by? And once you get that one-tap, that dopamine's going to be sent right to your brain, and you're going to want to do it over and over again. However, what you gotta understand is that that's not that easy to do, and so to make this thing that much more consistent, what you gotta understand is how to use this weapon, in particular the weapon's effective range, its bullet magnetism, its bloom, how many shots until it becomes inconsistent, all that kind of stuff, as well as the weapon's shot rhythm. If you've watched any of my videos from before, you know that I am a huge fan of mastering a hand cannon shot rhythm. If you haven't figured this out yet, then I've made a fantastic video which I'll link in the top right of your screen this very second, so by all means check that out, trust me, it's going to help you. But in terms of the Hawkmoon specifically, you're going to look at the weapon's base stats and realize this thing's shot rhythm is spectacular, as it's got a stability stat at 77, a handling stat at 84, aim assistance stat at 93, a recoil at 96, and an overall bounce intensity that's not only vertical, but only at 4. Now one could argue that these base stats alone are certainly worthy of it being exotic just by itself, but when you take these into account and realize how shot rhythm is affected by this, you are then going to understand that this weapon's distinctive sound, as well as the weapon's overall visual cues, can then make that shot rhythm that much easier to master. If you want to get those one taps and send Team Rocket blasting off again, then trust me, that's an absolute must to do. But the next thing that I want to cover is the weapon's base range, and as you already saw previously, its base range is at 57, but with the weapon standardized roll, it's already then going to be at 62. What does this mean for us? Excellent question, and we're going to go into a private match right now to actually analyze how this thing is then going to have an optimal effective range. As AJ here takes out his Darcy and measures exactly 30 meters, I then aim down sights and realize that this thing is then doing 70 for a crit, as we would expect. Going back just a smidge to 31 meters, we then see that this Hawkmoon is doing 68 per crit, and this then means to us that this weapon's optimal effective range is at 30 meters. Taking one step back, I want you to keep this in mind. This is the standardized roll that I'm testing and what you guys just saw, and so this thing can also happen to have randomized rolls, which we'll get into in just a couple of minutes, but it might happen to have something like, say, rangefinder, and thus increase this weapon's optimal effective range significantly. Just some more food for thought, I know, but the next thing that we're going to look at is the weapon's bullet magnetism, specifically at 10 meters and 20 meters respectively. As I speed up these test cases just a tiny little bit, we're going to shoot on the right hand side of the head and on the top side of the head at 10 meters. And here we're going to realize that you have got to land those shots on the right hand side of the head, as there's absolutely no leniency. But on the top side of the head, we can actually miss shots into the health bar, but not actually above the health bar itself. Going back to 20 meters, here we happen to see a little bit something different, but rather what we're going to realize is that both on the right hand side of the head and on the top side of the head, you can actually miss by a much wider margin of error, as this weapon's hitbox is much more increased at these longer distances, and not just on the right side of the head, but on the top side of the head, as we saw at 10 meters. Essentially what this means to you is how to use the weapon, and if you're going to miss shots on the top side of the head, regardless of whether that be close engagements or far range engagements, as that's then going to give you the most optimal chances to get more critical headshots. If you're going to miss shots on the right side of the head, then do so at distance, but not in close range distances, because I'm telling ya, there's absolutely no leniency for air there, and you're going to miss your shot and probably get eviscerated in the process, making enemy guardians say, "Thank you, check please, come again," and you don't want that, I don't want that, nobody wants that. Alrighty, now the very last thing that I want to show you, at least in terms of private matches and how to use the weapon, is understanding the weapon's bloom. As we go into a private match, we're going to shoot up against this wall, both in real time and also in slow motion. And in real time, we're going to understand one thing: when we're aiming down sights as well as hip firing, this weapon's recoil is vertical and vertical alone, and that's excellent news for us. However, by looking at the weapon's hipfire reticle in slow motion, one can tell that it takes exactly 3 shots before the weapon's hipfire reticle tickers no longer return to within the hipfire reticle, and that is significant. Once this occurs, bloom is going to be drastic, and that's going to make the weapon that much more inconsistent and that much more inaccurate. So this then means to you, land those first 3 shots. If you don't, then not only getting that first kill, but potentially winning that 1v2 engagement is going to be that much hard to do. And so I'm telling you, for your own benefit, make sure that you master this weapon's shot rhythm again, so then you can get those 3 taps and potentially 2 taps and eventually 1 taps for that very last guardian, obliterating them just like Exodia. And having seen all these tests, I think that you guys now get a very firm understanding of how the weapon's then functioning. Not just in terms of its optimal effective range, but the weapon's bullet magnetism, how much that you can miss and not miss, as well as the weapon's bloom, aka inconsistencies and inaccuracies, to make sure that you're getting those first couple of kills and eventually those 1 taps. Now, something that might be able to make this process a little bit easier is by potentially getting a randomized roll. And yes, I said random roll, aka a god roll, because this Hawkmoon has that perk called transformative, and thus it can get a wide variety of perks on this to make it that much more effective. Now, don't quote me on the exact way in which you can get these kinds of random rolls, I don't know yet, but I believe Bungie's going to give us that very last mission once a week, maybe something similar to that, I can't say for certainty, but once we do get some more drops of this, you can see all the perks that I recommend right there on screen. In the first column, we got Chamber Compensator, Corkscrew Rifling, Fluted Barrel, Hammer Forge Rifling, and Small Bore. Now, the second column is always going to have LI Magazine, but that third column has a wide variety of perks here, including Opening Shot, Rangefinder, Moving Target, Killing Wind, Snapshot Sights, Quick Draw, and Surplus, ensued by that last column to be Polymer Grip, Smooth Grip, or Texture Grip. Now, you all know me. I like to get those lethal plays and get those triple kills, lights out plays, Slayer mails, all that kind of jazz as often as possible. And so if I want to do it with the Hawkmoon, I'm going to look for 2 perks, Rangefinder or Killing Wind, and that's it. With that being said, I also know that many of you Guardians out there are not as hyper-aggressive or have the hyper-aggressive playstyle that I happen to have. So maybe what I'm looking for is not what you're looking for. So if you're looking for something different, then by all means, let me know down in the comment section below, and at the same time, also let me know how you master the weapon's shot rhythm. I'll reiterate this one more time. Once you master the weapon's shot rhythm, it's going to land crit after crit after crit, and you're going to get not just 2 taps but 1 taps on such a frequent basis, because it's going to be such a gratifying feeling that you want to do it over and over again. The Hawkmoon is like the one ring in the Lord of the Rings. You don't want to put it down because it keeps drawing you in and drawing you in, but I digress. If you found the video helpful and you're laying all those crits and getting those 1 taps, then by all means, share the video with all your friends, and let's be honest, who doesn't want a 1 tap? You do, I do, we all do. And at the same time, it's going to help the channel grow tremendously, and to you, I tip my hat in respect. That's pretty much all I've got for you as of right now, Dia Slayers. As always, GG, TNT.